Good evening. I'm incredibly proud of the Senate Democratic Caucus. Senator Tracy McCreary was an absolute rock star. She passed legislation this year protecting children and families from abuse through a new cross-reporting law in House Bill 2292, which just happened. Improving access to health care and lowering Medicaid costs through House Bill 2372, and she worked with Senator Patty Lewis to prevent domestic violence through several bills that address issues like cyberstalking, revenge porn, vehicle tracking, and more. Meanwhile, Senator Lewis, the first nurse to serve in the Senate, also did tremendous work on health care issues, including allowing Missouri women to receive a full year of prescription of birth control, ensuring that patients receiving surgery have access to anesthesia and are not limited to random caps from insurance companies, providing mental health care for first responders, and promoting the need for blood donors and more. And Senator Roberts helped usher through three major pieces of legislation aimed at driving economic growth, including the Revitalization Missouri Downtowns and Main Street Acts, Senate Bill 869, the Missouri Angel Investment Act, Senate Bill 1563, and MODESA, which will support economic growth around St. Louis, including the completion of Ballpark Village, the new development of the Millennium Hotel site, and expand space around Energizer Park. Senator Maggie Senator Maggie Nernburn also passed several bills to improve access to health care and to support our service members and first responders. Her legislation will make sure people in severe mental health crisis get the care they need, require health benefit plans to cover home blood pressure monitors, provide health coverage for National Guard members on extended duty, and legislation to honor the memory of firefighter paramedic Graham Hoffman. And Senator Barbara Washington passed some important reforms to improve maternal mortality, and she also passed legislation to encourage and support agriculture education in our schools. And Senator Carla May passed an important provision to support the law library in St. Louis. All in all, it was a great work by our great caucus, and with that, we can take any questions.
Senator, what exactly caused, what were the sticking points in the property tax reform negotiations yesterday, and what does the caucus think of this siloing idea?
Well, first off, we passed through the Senate a while ago a property tax relief for Missourians. It also shows transparency. The Senator had language in there to clear up the appeals process and give it length of time. So we passed a very measured, good property tax bill and sent it to the House, and they failed to act on that. So that's what happened. I cannot tell you what they did on the other side of this building, but we sent them some very, very good legislation that would have given people true relief.
That's Caucus bill?
Yes, 1410.
But that didn't include the siloing that she asked about. What is the caucus position on siloing rates so that commercial property gets one rate, residential property gets one rate, personal property gets a rate, the way it's done in St. Louis County?
Yeah, well, the way it's done in St. Louis County works really well. I don't know that we have a caucus position on it, but that was part of the, I guess maybe their issue on the other side of the building here. You know, at the end of the day, we gave them very good legislation and opportunities. We also negotiated a few more pieces in there, and then at one point, you know, it just fell apart on their side. That nothing to do with us.
Do you think that turning point for the session was when the changes to the PQ happened? Because it seems from that point on, the session got a lot more productive. It was the opposite of last year.
Yeah, we tried to slow the Senate down, and you know, our motto has been all year is to not have a rubber stamp Senate. And actually, we did so well that Republicans are repeating our motto on the floor towards the end of session. So it was great. Great. So we did that in the beginning, and we got some rule changes, I believe. You know, whether the PQ, the signatures, or slowing down at the end of the process. A lot of people don't look at that, but letting bills sit for a day towards the end of the session, it was a big deal, and it helped us and quite frankly our colleagues on the other side to be able to look at this legislation better and be able to vet it, and I think that had a calming effect in the Senate.
Senator Weber, Senator Lukemeyer yesterday, during the press conference with the governor, singled you out as someone who was key to so many of the negotiations that occurred on these bills. What do you think was the key to your relationship with Senator Lukemeyer or other Republicans that put
I think all of us came in here as a group with a commitment to rebuilding the Senate, and I think the first thing we wanted to see this year before we really started having bills move was a commitment from the Republican Party that they also wanted to work collaboratively and avoid the mistakes of last year. And I think once that happened, I think once we put in the time, we put in the energy, we put in the work, that everybody held the floor for hours back in January. And I think once that happened and once that rule change was made, I think we felt more comfortable that they were committed to working collaboratively, which we always have been, and we were willing to do that. Just a quick thing on the siloing. That was in the bill that we sent over today. That was in the bill that Sandy Crawford passed. They asked it to be pulled out of the conference committee report. The speaker came over and said that they wanted 3 things. We gave them, this was yesterday for the conference, we gave them all 3 things. The speaker said that if we gave him those 3 things, he would pass the bill. We gave him those 3 things. The floor leader came over and said he needed a 4th thing. We gave him the 4th thing. And then after giving him exactly what the speaker had asked for, and he said he would pass the bill, after what the floor leader asked for, he said he would pass the bill, they chose not to pass the bill. So I sincerely don't know why, but siloing was something that came out of the Senate. The House Republicans asked that it would be pulled out. We supported it as a group, but we agreed to pull it out at their request, and then they killed the bill anyway. So I sincerely don't know why they did that. You'll have to ask them.
Representative Taylor said it came down to the contract negotiation came down to one word, which was the amendment to Senate Bill 3 from the special session.
And again, I'm going to go back to exactly what I understand that last night when we were in these negotiations, the representatives again became fixated on Senate Bill 3, and it's really important for everybody to recognize Senate Bill 3 is tied up in litigation. We were committed on not touching Senate Bill 3 because it is tied up in litigation. And so our commitment was to pass a comprehensive property tax reform package that was moderate in terms of the impact on the taxing jurisdictions. We have so much happening right now, and none of it is happening in a vacuum. When we look at what could possibly happen if Missouri voters choose to eliminate the income tax and what that will do in terms of a hole in the general revenue, when we look at rising costs everywhere and families struggling with affordability, we cannot place more burden on taxing jurisdictions that provide essential services like school districts, public safety, libraries. Those are the things that our caucus was committed to from the very beginning, and I do give Senate Republicans credit for recognizing all of that. And that is why we sent over a very moderate, reasonable package in Senate Bill 14. I'm disappointed in how negotiations broke down last night, and the bottom line is, folks, the Republicans in the House moved the goalpost over and over and over again. And that is why we came in here this morning in the Missouri Senate and we passed out essentially the conference report, the entire legislative package. We passed that back over to the House of Representatives this morning. One of our first things that we did. And you know what? We passed that out unanimously. That rarely happens, and I'm disappointed that House Republicans did not pick up and pass property tax reform.
Sorry, can you repeat the bill number that was passed today?
The bill number that was passed today, we attached it to the short-term rental bill, and I'm going to apologize, I don't have the House bill number with me right now, but it was on the short-term rental bill, and that was the 1066 and 1088 that we were negotiating on, and so I was proud to champion that legislation. It was going to, the underlying provision of that bill was to ensure that if you have a short-term rental, like an Airbnb, that you're going to be taxed at the property tax rate, a residential property tax rate, and not at commercial rate.
I think like the fate of like the 4 most high-profile controversial things over the last 2 years is going to be decided in November. So abortion, income tax, probably redistricting, and IP. How do you think voters are going to perceive all those things?
I think the voters are going to see. I think we've found out time and time again, Missouri voters are smart, and I think they're going to see what these things are truly for what they are. The question is, we don't know exactly when they're all going to be. I believe they haven't decided what if they're going to be in August or they're going to be in November, and that will decide a lot of different things. I do disagree. I think the redistricting is not over with since the Supreme Court decision. I think that's something we face again probably coming next year, unfortunately. So I think the voters are gonna see through a lot of these things. I don't think they're gonna wanna take away their own voice to be able to for IP reform. I don't think they're gonna want to make their cost of living rise across the board, especially our folks on fixed incomes. 41% of the people in Missouri do not pay income tax. They will get a huge tax increase across the board. And, I don't think they're gonna vote for that, but we shall see. There's gonna probably be a lot of money dumped in from the other side to try to confuse folks, but I think at the end of the day, they're gonna see that it's gonna cost them in the pocketbook. We got people looking at $4.50 gas and here in Missouri, and it's troublesome, and people are having a hard time making ends meet. And then they wanna add tax, and they have the ability to tax gas and all those other things, and they're giving that power to elected politicians.
And this, to follow up on your point about redistricting next year, and this may be a question for Senator Roberts, and Senator May, I know you're not gonna be here, but you may wanna also chime in on this. Republicans have supported the first district for decades because it actually helps them in the long run, because it makes the surrounding districts more Republican. Do you think that you can make a case to your colleagues if they contemplate doing what they did to the first district to the fifth district next year, that not only is it not in their best interest, but it strikes a dagger into black political power in St. Louis? So I'd like both of you to take this.
Well, what we have seen across the country is very unfortunate. Not only have we seen districts be redrawn and the African-American voice being diminished over the country, it is unfortunate that we have this type of leadership that don't value all Americans. And all Americans should have a voice. And to roll back years in history of civil rights like it never existed, like it never took place, it amazes me how voters are even agreeing with this type of thing. But I think the pendulum is going to swing back. And I'm hoping that Missouri stands up and let their voices be heard and understand that representation for African Americans is just as important as any other representation, and that we need to keep the 1st Congressional District, and the 5th Congressional District should not have been redrawn. And I'm hoping that they elect Reverend Cleaver to send a loud message that we're not going to tolerate this type of leadership. And I think this is poor leadership when you do something of that nature. It's all about greed, and it doesn't do anything to help Missourians at all. So I'm hoping that we're able to retain this district, and I'm hoping that the voters will send a loud message that this is not the type of leadership that we should be supporting.
Do you see any appetite for legislation that would clarify what county clerks are supposed to do? We're a week or so away from when ballots need to be certified for August, and clerks, after the Supreme Court ruling last week, don't really know which maps they're supposed to be using.
We don't need legislation. We need the Secretary of State to do his job.
Absolutely.
That's it. We don't
And
need
he's
legislation.
failing to do that. And he's failing the citizens of Missouri.
No, that's 100% true. They definitely, they're trying to create confusion, and I think that's what their game plan is here. The Secretary of State should do his job. They should we know that they have the signatures. We know they have them. It's time to move on, certify that, let the people know what they're going to be voting on. Not everybody's as fortunate as we are. In St. Louis County, they print the ballots when you're there. There's a lot of other areas where they have to print the ballots ahead of time, but people are not going to know who they're voting for, and it's going to be troublesome.
Past elections show that big ballot measures on primary ballots drive turnout. Right to work in 2018, there were probably double the number of Democratic ballots taken than would have otherwise been taken. Last year, we saw that big ballot measures don't drive turnout during a presidential election. Do you think big ballot measures will change the turnout, which is generally about 2/3 in an off-year election? And will that benefit Democrats?
Yeah, I think it could, yes, definitely. I mean, if we're looking at the issues that are gonna be out there, they're gonna be issues that, you know, quite frankly, these are bipartisan issues. Republicans don't want their voice taken away either, you know? They don't want politicians making decisions for them. They don't want politicians to be the only one that can put something in the Constitution. They want the ability, they said it time and time again with a lot of, you know, our initiative petitions. You know, whether it's marijuana, whether it's minimum wage, all these things that they have a voice in, and they've been able to do, right to work, all these things that they've been able to do, those are bipartisan votes. So I think it's gonna drive that turnout for those particular issues. Getting into the weeds of how does that help, you know, if they're in August, they may stack them all up in August, because they may be afraid of putting these things in November. That could be a possibility. I don't know what they're gonna do, because I don't know that anything that they have is popular.
And do you think that the Democratic caucus of the Senate will be larger than 10 next year?
That is our goal. The goal is definitely be larger than 10, get out of the super minority for sure.
To that point, Governor said yesterday that even if the income tax question fails, he'll consider it a successful piece of legislation if it were to pass, and the margins are even smaller in next year's session. How do you see those negotiations and legislation to actually implement this playing out?
Well, that would be very interesting, and we call it the everything tax, because that's what it is. This is not about income tax. The only thing that the people are gonna be voting for is to give the power back to politicians to be able to raise sales taxes on everything and use taxes on things that they've never paid before. Could also sales tax on gas and increase the cost of their life. So if that, however, somehow passes, I think it'd be very interesting to see what happens in this building.
Okay, thanks everyone.